in the quiet cobbled streets of a London borough, where Victorian houses stood shoulder to shoulder, 16-year-old Sarah felt her world crumble. The doctor's words echoed in her ears, a relentless drumbeat of positive, pregnant, 16 weeks. Her stomach, once flat and unremarkable, now held a secret that threatened to engulf her. Fear, hot and suffocating, seized her. She had always been the apple of her parents' eye, Arthur and Eleanor, pillars of their conservative community, their lives meticulously ordered. Sarah's news was not just a deviation. It was an earthquake. When she finally confessed, huddled on the plush velvet sofa in their immaculate living room, the silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. Her father's face, usually so kind, hardened into a mask of disbelief and then, cold fury. Her mother, Eleanor, dissolved into quiet sobs, her hands clasped tightly over her mouth. "How could you, Sarah?" Arthur's voice was a low growl. "You've disgraced this family. Everything we've built, everything we believed in." The accusations, the shame, the bitter disappointment rained down on her. There was no understanding, no compassion, only a profound sense of betrayal. "Get out," her father finally commanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and anguish. "You are no longer welcome here. You made your bed. Now lie in it." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she packed a small bag, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Her mother didn't look at her, only continued to weep. Her father stood by the door, a rigid sentinel of his shattered expectations. As she stepped out into the cold London night, the door clicked shut behind her, severing her from the only home she had ever known. Her boyfriend, Mark, the charming boy who had whispered sweet nothings and promised forever, was nowhere to be found. A hastily scribbled note, left on her doorstep a few days later, confirmed her worst fears. "I can't do this, Sarah. I'm sorry. It's too much." The regret was a physical ache, a searing pain in her chest. She had been so foolish, so naive. Now, she was utterly alone, adrift in a city that suddenly felt vast and indifferent. The first few weeks were a blur of desperation. Sarah slept on park benches, in bus shelters, and sometimes, if she was lucky, in the common room of a rundown youth hostel. Hunger gnawed at her, and the constant fear for her unborn child was a heavy weight. She quickly learned the harsh realities of survival on the streets. The kindness of strangers, a rare beacon in the pervasive darkness. An elderly woman, a former nurse named Agnes, found her shivering in a doorway one morning and took her in. Agnes lived in a small, cluttered flat above a bakery, and though she had little, she offered Sarah a warm bed, food, and, most importantly, a glimmer of hope. Agnes became Sarah's lifeline. She helped Sarah navigate the social services, find prenatal care, and enroll in a night school program to continue her education. Sarah was determined. She would not let her past define her, nor would she let her child suffer for her mistakes. Every day was a battle, but the tiny flutter in her womb was a constant reminder of the life she was fighting for. 9 months later, in a small sterile hospital room, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Michael. Holding him for the first time, all the pain, the loneliness, the fear, seemed to melt away, replaced by an overwhelming surge of love and fierce protectiveness. Michael was her reason, her purpose. Sarah worked tirelessly. During the day, she cleaned offices and waited tables. At night, she studied, often with Michael sleeping soundly in a makeshift crib beside her. Agnes, despite her age, helped care for Michael, allowing Sarah to pursue her dreams. Sarah saved every penny, slowly building a small nest egg. She eventually earned her diploma, then pursued a degree in business management through online courses. Her resilience was extraordinary, fueled by the unwavering love for her son. Michael grew into a bright, compassionate boy. Sarah instilled in him the values of hard work, kindness, and perseverance. She never spoke ill of his grandparents, only saying they lived far away. Michael, seeing his mother's tireless dedication, developed a deep respect for her sacrifices. He excelled in school, driven by a desire to ease his mother's burdens. He saw the struggles of others, and felt a strong calling to help, deciding early on to pursue a career in medicine. Years passed. Sarah, through sheer grit and astute business sense, had built a successful catering company, The Unfolding Bloom, a testament to her own journey of growth. She was respected in her community, a woman of quiet strength and dignity. Michael, true to his word, had graduated from medical school with honors and specialized in cardiac surgery. He was now a highly regarded surgeon at one of London's most prestigious hospitals. Known not only for his skill, but also for his empathy and generosity. 35 years after Sarah had been cast out, a phone call shattered the quiet routine of Arthur and Eleanor's lives. Arthur, now 71, had suffered a severe heart attack. The prognosis was grim. He needed complex bypass surgery, and the cost was astronomical. Their savings, modest at best, were nowhere near enough. Eleanor, frail and weary, felt the familiar pang of despair. They had lived a quiet, unassuming life, filled with the regret of a daughter lost, but too proud to seek her out. At St. Jude's Hospital, Arthur's case landed on Dr. Michael Thorne's desk. Michael reviewed the charts, recognizing the severity of the condition, and the family's financial distress. Something about the father's name, Arthur, stirred a faint, unplaceable memory in his mind. A name his mother had occasionally mentioned in passing, when speaking of her distant past. Driven by his innate kindness and a deep sense of duty, Michael made a decision. He would perform the surgery pro bono, absorbing the significant cost himself. The surgery was long and arduous, but Michael's hands were steady, his focus absolute. Days later, Arthur was recovering, weak but alive. Eleanor wept tears of relief, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the brilliant young doctor who had saved her husband's life without asking for a single penny. "We must thank him properly, Arthur," Eleanor insisted, her voice still hoarse with emotion. "He is a true angel." 2 weeks later, Arthur, still a little unsteady, and Eleanor, carrying a basket laden with homemade pastries and a roasted chicken, made their way to Dr. Thorne's modest, yet elegant, house in a leafy suburban street. Eleanor had insisted on bringing food, a small token of their immense appreciation. Eleanor rang the doorbell, her heart thrumming with anticipation. The door opened, and a woman stood there, her hair now streaked with silver, lines of experience etched around her eyes, but unmistakably. Eleanor gasped, the basket nearly slipping from her hands. Arthur's eyes widened, his jaw dropping. Time seemed to stand still. "Sarah," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah, who had heard the doorbell and expected Michael's colleague, froze. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, met her mother's, then her father's. The years melted away, replaced by the raw emotions of that fateful night. "Mother, father." Sarah's voice was a fragile thread. Just then, Michael, hearing the commotion, came to the door, still in his scrubs, a tired but gentle smile on his face. "Mom, who is it?" he asked, then stopped short, seeing the stunned faces of his recent patient and his wife. Eleanor's gaze darted between Sarah and Michael, a dawning realization slowly spreading across her face. "Mom," she repeated, her voice laced with a tremor. "He called you Mom." Sarah, her voice thick with emotion, finally broke the silence. "Father, Mother, this is my son, Michael, your grandson." The words hung in the air, heavy with revelation. Arthur and Eleanor stared, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within them. Shock, disbelief, profound regret, and an overwhelming, unexpected joy. The kind doctor who had saved Arthur's life was their own flesh and blood, the child of the daughter they had so cruelly cast aside. Tears welled in Arthur's eyes, and he reached out a trembling hand towards Sarah. "My daughter, my grandson," his voice cracked. "Sarah, forgive us, we were so wrong. So terribly, terribly wrong." Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, rushed forward and embraced Sarah, a desperate, long overdue hug. "My baby," she sobbed, "I'm so sorry. Forgive me, please." Sarah, though the pain of the past still lingered, felt a deep well of forgiveness open within her. She hugged her mother tightly, then looked at her father, his face etched with remorse. "It's okay, Father," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's all okay now." Michael, witnessing the raw emotion of the reunion, felt a warmth spread through him. He had always known his mother had a past, a story she rarely spoke of, but he had never imagined this. The pieces of his own family history were finally falling into place. That evening, the 3 generations sat together, sharing the homemade food, sharing stories, and slowly, carefully, rebuilding the bridges that had been burned so long ago. The shame and regret that had haunted Arthur and Eleanor for decades began to lift, replaced by the quiet joy of a family reunited, a wound finally healed, and a future, however unexpected, that promised warmth and connection. Sarah, the young girl who had been cast out, had not only survived, but had blossomed, raising a remarkable son who, in a twist of fate, had brought them all back together.